On va tourner un peu. On s'écarte, ouais.
At Villandry, stone and vegetation live side by side in perfect harmony. The fabulous coherence of these French-style gardens is down to the will of one man who inherited this family estate. His chateau is prized by some 350,000 visitors each year, and also by artists and photographers, researchers, and sportsmen and women who are all welcomed by this warm and friendly host. Henri Carvallo is a passionate man, a manager, botanist, ecologist, and historian of his home.
The chateau was built by Jean Le Breton, who was the superintendent for the finances of Francis I. He needed some land on which to settle, so he acquired the old Château de Villandry, a medieval castle that had fallen into ruins. All he kept was the dungeon. On the foundations of that middle-aged chateau, he built the beautiful Renaissance chateau that is highly characteristic of the Second Renaissance. The decorative pavilions that one normally finds on the ends of the wings of a chateau from the First Renaissance have been replaced here by these square pavilions on the ends of each wing, either side of the Court of Honour, and topped with a pyramidal roof. There's also a greater simplicity in the layout of the doors, windows and roof windows. There's a greater geometry, but one still finds Renaissance roof windows that are very decorative, with scrolls and ornate columns. Villandry remained in the Le Breton family until the middle of the 18th century. Then, in 1754, it was bought by Mr. de Castellane, who was from an illustrious family from the provincial nobility. He constructed outbuildings, the beautiful courtyard behind me, and the conciergerie opposite in a purely Louis XV style that is more geometric, with greater symmetry in the architecture and greater simplicity.
Visitors to Villandry come first and foremost to walk in the gardens. They only enter the chateau after having been charmed by the magic of the surroundings. The master of this sublime transformation of nature is a quiet man who never seems overwhelmed by the task in hand: to maintain the chateau, oversee the gardens, and manage a staff of 50. This ease stems from his determination to continue the mission started by his ancestors.
In the 19th century, the owner of the Château de Villandry created an English-style park around the chateau with sweeping lawns, glass houses and small trees. It was a more natural garden than the very formal and structured garden you see today. It was my great-grandparents who, in 1906, decided to reintroduce a Renaissance-style order around the Château de Villandry. They drew on general literature about gardening, old plans of the chateau, and their own archaeological research and digs in order to locate the terracing system you see here and to precisely define the decorative kitchen garden. We know that during the Renaissance, the owner of the chateau liked to follow the progress through his window of new vegetables such as tomatoes from America or eggplant from India. So this garden close by the chateau had a botanical vocation, but it was also meant to be decorative. That's why you find flowers mixed in with the produce and this whole geometry formed by box hedges, an idea that also came from Italy during the Renaissance.
Laurent, Portuguez, head gardener at the Château de Villandry. I've been head gardener here at Villandry for the past 6 years.
At 6 a.m, Laurent divides up the work according to a detailed plan, which takes into account the skills of each person and the discretion required to carry out their work during opening hours.
Aurelien's mowing because We didn't do it last week. Then we'll do it next Monday. Véronique, can you continue tying up the vine?
The team is composed of 8 permanent gardeners with some occasional helpers and interns. This daily organisation means the team can achieve some amazing tasks. 180,000 plants are planted and replaced each year in order to ensure the colour in the beds and vary the designs that symbolise the emotions of our existence or the forces from the cosmos through the seasons. The sun garden, the ornaments garden, the garden of love, the simple garden, the kitchen garden, the maze, the water mirror, the cloisters garden, and lastly, the garden of the crosses. Before reaching their glorious multicoloured summer stage, the kitchen gardens start out slowly under glass from early spring. The decorative vegetables and flowers are painstakingly potted and are given the utmost care and attention. These are lengthy, humble tasks that require patience and precision.
Here we're in the production greenhouses. Throughout the spring, from February to June, we produce 80,000 flower and vegetable plants, mainly vegetables for the kitchen garden and summer cultivation. Here we're preparing some summer flowers that will be planted out in early May, when there's no more risk of frost.
In March, when the threat of frost is past, everyone gets busy transporting and loading thousands of salad plants ordered from local market gardeners. Because, and who'd have thought it, before appearing on our plates, salad plants were first and foremost ornamental plants. Their rounded shapes and vibrant green hues bring a splash of colour to the garden.
We received our salads this morning. They're ready to go and were grown by a market gardener. They make up the majority of our spring cultivation. In the kitchen garden, we'll have between 23 and 24,000 salads this year, with 8 different varieties. We like to play with the different colours and shapes. There's the cos lettuce that gives height, Batavia, oak leaf, and the red Dolorosa frisée. These salads will be planted with organic cabbages. The earth has been tilled, and then, once it's been loosened, we marked out the exact spots where the salads are to be planted. And after distributing them around the garden, we just need to plant them with our fingers. 5 people can plant 23,000 salads, and that takes us a week. We can plant between 3,000 and 5,000 salads a day, depending on the weather.
Well, that one's come out a little.
Yes, that one there. And the one next to it.
Well, this one.
That one, towards you. That's it. Alois is doing a 5-week internship in the gardens with us. It's a way of really getting to understand the business. 5 weeks is long enough to become a part of the team, to see how we work and to get your hands dirty, because it's not just about watching.
It's not boring at all because they use techniques you don't see anywhere else. For example, marking out the rows to the closest centimetre is really interesting and requires a lot of concentration. We're going to plant almost 18,000 salads. Those are some numbers for a garden. In a regular business, you'd never see orders as big as these. It's mainly the quantities and the details. All the weeding has to be done by hand. It's very impressive.
The gardens of the chateau run alongside the village of Villandry and the local school. This little primary school gets help and advice from Laurent Portuguez, head gardener at the chateau. This is a school where you learn that the earth is fertile, and if you put your hands in it, it's not to get your fingers dirty, but to make food for tomorrow.
All the teachers in the school wanted to create a garden, so we decided to embark upon a project with the children, mainly the bigger ones who have worked on different blueprints. Then we decided to work in symmetry in relation to the gardens at the chateau. The next step was planting the flowers and vegetables. And here too, we decided to respect a symmetry of colour. But we had a few problems the first year.
Come on, you have to plant the cabbages now.
Where should I put this?
Over there. We'll have 6 cabbages here. Hold the leaves, put some earth there, and press it gently with your fingers. Next one. Behind.
There's spinach, salad, and cabbages.
The children from Villandry have a beautiful garden in their village, so it's important that they get involved, that they get to know it, and that they don't just see it as a public park because they can go there for free. They need to understand that it's a job, and it will help them develop some understanding of how gardening works. And it'll train them so we have gardeners in the future to replace us. They're the next generation.
Leaving healthy land to these children is the primary preoccupation in Villandry. The chateau is cultivating best practices. To respect biodiversity, it is committed to an organic approach to not using pesticides. They share their more innovative methods.
The widespread use of chemicals is very brutal, not at all subtle, and is non-selective. Here, we are always on our guard, watching what is happening and favouring prevention. I think the results achieved over the last 3 years show that this is working very well, and I think that Villandry could serve as an example, and that's very important.
What is remarkable here is that one is dealing with a very structured kitchen garden that has been entirely shaped by man. It's naturally under attack from all kinds of pests that want to eat these magnificent vegetables. For decades and until recently, the only way to combat them and the various diseases was to treat with synthetic chemical pesticides. And we've seen here in this garden, if you use a lot of pesticides, you soon reach the limits of such a system. By that I mean that they had to use more and more pesticides, and it was increasingly difficult to achieve the same results. Now, while the garden looks the same as it always has, we're no longer using any kind of chemicals.
We're getting out the malaise tent. A tent that enables us to catch flying insects. The key is to position it in a fairly open space, not to limit the flying insects. This is a good place. Now we'll prepare the trap with a liquid made from salt, water and soap. The salt allows us to preserve the insects we capture, and the soap kills them quickly. That's it, the tent is ready. The idea is fairly simple. We have 4 openings, and the insects can't see the black, so they bump into the tent and climb upwards in order to escape. They end up in channels on each side that lead to a corridor that goes into this recipient, and they become exhausted and drown in the container. We leave the tent for 48 hours, and then we'll have a look at the insects that were caught. The cup will go here. Now we fill it with the trap liquid. The same used in the malaise tent. We have to close it up carefully all around so no earth falls into the cup. This is targeting all climbing insects like beetles and such like. There, the 2 traps are in place. All we need to do now is place others in other parts of Villandry, so we can carry out our study in full.
Where are we?
We've just arrived at the University François Rabelais in Tours, and the INNOPHYT offices in the laboratory just over here on the right. Here are the samples. There. In Villandry, we've been carrying out a generalized study into insect populations, into the balance between pests and predators. We're trying to find solutions to combat certain pests that don't have natural predators in Villandry. When the head gardener has a problem, he tells us about it and we look into it. Or when he finds insects he's not familiar with, he gives them to us to identify. That way he knows what to do. We are monitoring the biodiversity to study its evolution over time. In terms of diseases and pests, we work with Villandry when they need it. We still use certain natural products like sulfur and copper, which can be toxic in high doses, but they're still natural products and which aren't synthetic chemicals. Synthetic chemicals have too high an impact on the overall biodiversity. We're now finding a much greater diversity of insects, and beetles in particular. Beetles are very useful predators in gardens, mainly because they eat worms and slugs. They're also predators for certain pests. Since we stopped using chemicals, we found a lot of insects are solving the problems we had with the chemicals. There are other dragonflies. Look, those ones are bigger.
Located nearby the greenhouses, the audience pavilion is set aside for children. Brigitte Proux has created an introduction to environmental gardening for them.
Who can tell me what organic means?
When there's no chemicals used.
Yes, that's right. When we talk about organic fruit and vegetables, it means those fruit and vegetables that haven't been treated with chemicals or pesticides. They have grown naturally with natural products. And today, we are going to see how you can grow vegetables naturally. The first important rule for an organic garden is crop rotation. If you always put the same plant in the same place every year, it will always take the same food from the soil, and the soil won't be fertile anymore. It's the same for diseases. If the plant is diseased, the earth will be contaminated and will carry the disease on from year to year. The second important rule for organic gardening is understanding friendly plants and enemy plants. Plants like growing near other plants they like and which help them grow. For example, tomatoes are good to grow near cabbages. Why is that? Because the smell of tomatoes stops cabbage white butterflies from flying over the cabbages and laying eggs on them, which then hatch into caterpillars that eat all the cabbage leaves. Onions are good besides carrots. It's the same thing, because they prevent carrot fly.
At harvest time, the vegetables are given away to staff and visitors who can go home with a seasonal meal.
My name is Thomas Viardin, and I've been a gardener at the Château de Villandry for 4 years. I replaced an elderly gardener who retired. I come to work here every day, and I love it.
This morning we planted out beets over there, and now we're planting celery. I started work here in 1989, so I've been here for 25 years. I'm the last of the old crew, and I was here when they were using chemicals. We would spray weed killer on the paths once a year, so we'd have no weeds for 12 months. And now we've gone back to organic gardening. We do everything by hand, and that's more work for everyone, and you have to go back over the same places more frequently, especially right now when it's been raining practically every day and the weeds grow back quickly. And now that we're organic, you have to accept that it's a little less pretty than it was when we used chemicals, when they killed everything. Of course, it's beautiful, but it killed all the insects. Now it's a little less beautiful, but there are still insects, including predatory insects that come naturally and kill certain other ones.
You can see that the broad beans have got black fly. To combat that, we introduced ladybird larvae because we garden organically here. The larvae were introduced in spring, they grew, and the ladybirds have reproduced, creating a new cycle of larvae, so we can keep fighting the black fly.
The Chateau's gardens have been labelled as a refuge by the LPO Bird Protection League. Photographers have carte blanche to practice their art here.
The blackbird fledgling came down and is now hidden in the vegetation. It will wait there until the adult returns with some food. It came out of the nest not very long ago, and it's still being fed by its parents. It's happening very far away, but the adult has just arrived. I don't know if you can see it, but the fledgling is on the... and the adult is above. The idea is to create an exhibition on the birds at the Château de Villandry. The gardens were classified as an LPO refuge last year, I think. So, to illustrate all the wildlife biodiversity in the gardens, we were asked to do a photo reportage over an 18-month period. The aim is to carry out a photographic census of the birds here. Not necessarily to produce a collection, but to try and create some artistic photographs. I think 90 to 100 species have been observed on the site, which proves that it is a very attractive site for birds. Here's the blackbird back out again for a look around. They like staying hidden, but after a while... Oh, it's ours, it's gone. We come here regularly to cover the various wildlife events. Feeding the blackbird will last a day or two, and then afterwards, it will be too late.
At the start of the season, when the flowers haven't yet filled the beds with colour, the strict organisation of the garden makes it seem like a giant chessboard, with pawns and bishops placed between the perfectly straight box hedges. So it's no surprise that the proprietor of the chateau is a fan of the game and offers introductory lessons for newcomers and competitions for champions.
This is getting difficult.
You're giving the game away?
Yes, well...
Such generosity.
Bravo!
The Château de Villandry regularly hosts events such as the Kitchen Garden Festival, the Garden Rendezvous, illuminated soirees, and today there's a chess-themed event, and we are hosting the French Speed Chess Championships.
Those playing black can press the start button.
Each player has 20 minutes. There are some very young players here. There's even one girl who is the regional champion in the under-10s age group. That means she's the best in her category. Chess has become very popular in schools over the last few years. It is very educational, and it helps children learn self-control, concentration, and reflection, whilst having fun. We also have another very talented French girl here, who is 4 times French champion for slow games, which better show how good a player is. Her name is Sophie Millet.
I learned to play chess when I was 4, and I started entering competitions when I was 7. I won my first French youth champion title when I was 15. And then I was 4 times French champion. And I've just won my first French speed chess champion title here.
There are traditional ways to start a game, and everybody knows them, but there are a lot of them. After a certain time, after the 10th game, you start to leave the theory behind and find yourself in unknown situations where you have to think. That explains why it goes so quickly at first. In 2000, chess became a sport. It's a sport that is less physical than football, for example, but it's a sport where players play against one another and each player is equally matched, which responds well to the definition of a sport. It is very competitive and our champions really fight hard to win.
There's a great atmosphere here. And chess being a game of kings, it's great to play in a chateau, which is really fit for the purpose.
I'm very happy to continue organising chess-related events here that please our visitors and help animate the Château de Villandry, which is dedicated to cultural tourism but should be open to more sporty, fun activities.
My name is Nicolas Bullit. A few years ago, Mr. Carvallo, the owner of the chateau, made me responsible for the tennis activity on this court, which, as you can see, is a grass court. There are very few in France, around 10 perhaps. When Mr. Carvallo's great-grandfather acquired this property, this area was dirt, like a clay court you might see today. It was a patch of grassless land that was more or less abandoned. Gradually, because it was abandoned, the area became a meditative place, somewhere people came for some peace. But if you came here as a tennis player, you could immediately imagine it being a tennis court because of the dimensions. And then there was one. Mr. Carvallo and Laurent, Portuguez, the head gardener, came up with a project to create a grass court here, which requires a lot of work, and which, in the spirit of the chateau, provides an additional garden among the others. First and foremost, it is perhaps a special garden in which one can have fun, before being a place where competitions or the like are held. Several times a year, visitors have a pleasant surprise when they arrive here to discover this wonderful place and are able to play. We lend them rackets and balls. There are nets for the children, and they can have fun playing barefoot in jeans and enjoy what is, above everything, an unusual special garden.
Betty, you need to go here. If you go there, it's Australian style, but that's good for us.
It is clearly Villandry's vocation now to both seek beauty and to be as open as possible. And I think there's a very pleasant ambience, having tennis played in a garden here.
The word open is a serious one here, because the gardens of Villandry are open from sunrise to sunset. Villandry has an impressive record. Of all the chateaux of the Loire Valley, Villandry's visitors stay the longest. On average, they stay here for over 3 hours. Enchanted by the magic of nature here, it's easy to stroll around and forget the passage of time. The fascination for the gardens does not, however, overshadow any interest for the interiors. To visit them, we will once again follow this light-footed man who has foregone the opportunity to live in his chateau in order to dedicate it to the memory and passions of its past occupants.
Here we are in the dining room, which is characteristic of the style of Mr. de Castellane, who wanted to bring his Provençal roots to the interior of Villandry in the 18th century. The tones, the fountain here, and all the decorative elements remind us of his taste for Provence, his land of origin. Here we are in the Gallery of Spanish Art, which was the original reason for the acquisition of the Château de Villandry by my great-grandparents. They were carrying out medical research in Paris and had begun to put together this collection of Spanish art, which was their main artistic interest. They subsequently became interested in architecture and gardens, but they were looking for a big country house in which to present their collection because their apartment in Paris was no longer big enough. Villandry had its gallery space, which is quite remarkable, and was perfect for presenting these fine paintings, which are mainly from 17th century Spain. Here we are, at the end of the collection of Spanish art. You can see this wonderful mudéjar-style ceiling, which was installed here by my great-grandfather, Joachim Carvallo, who often went to Spain to buy art. He found it in an auction in Toledo, this Moorish ceiling that is highly characteristic of the mudéjar style of the Arab artisans who stayed in Spain a long time after the Christian reconquest, which happened in Toledo towards the end of the 16th century. It is composed of over 3,000 pieces of cedar that make up a veritable jigsaw puzzle.
We're delighted to welcome you here for this illumination workshop. You're each going to make a piece that you will paint and which you can take home. We're in the universe of painting, and we're going to bring some flowers to life. You're going to be botanical painters and colorists. These are botanical paintings that are made in the traditional way. There was no printing back then, and they needed a way to share these works, and the technique they came up with was the one you're going to use. This used to be called a cache back in the Middle Ages, but today we call it a stencil. And thanks to the stencil, you have the place for the colours you're going to add. The paint is water-based paint or gouache, and we put it on with these lovely little brushes made from pig bristle. You've seen how beautiful all the flowers are at the Château de Villandry. There are lots of different colours, and each flower has its own ways. They have little touches of colour, little shady parts, different reliefs, and sometimes different greens on the leaves. You're going to do just like what nature does. You're going to use a stencil, and you'll choose how to arrange the colour. You'll lay down the colours, plain colours, little contrasts and highlights, okay? You are the artists of nature today. The art of illumination is the art of colour, natural colour. These are the illustrations that were used in manuscripts from the Middle Ages. At the Château de Villandry, you can find this wonderful art through the huge palette of all the colours that comes from the work of the gardeners who wake up the flowers. We're going to use the whole flower, or just parts of it, to make the colours. And the frame is what brings it all together. You can colour the edges a little, and then it's finished. It's yellow ochre, like the earth.
Is it really earth?
Yes. Have you studied ancient history? It's exactly the same earth that prehistoric man used. It's pretty, isn't it? Well done. Look, she's finished.
This inspirational place encourages different vocations. Stand behind the painter and listen closely. You might learn something.
I'm here to resolve the problem of the begonias, which is no mean feat. How to paint begonias. That is the fascinating thing about painting, trying to find things out. First, I'm going to find the different colours of the begonias, and then I'll do the leaves and the earth, because I'm going to put out the fire around them. First, I'm going to set it on fire, and then I'll take care of the rest which doesn't burn. But the thing is to start with the powerful colour of these flowers, so beloved of grandmothers, caretakers' flowers. When you come to Villandry to paint or draw, first you open your eyes and look, and by dint of looking you start to see, and what you see is amazing. It's nature that has been completely domesticated. I think in the end it's that rigidity of form and the rigidity of drawing the garden that reassures the people looking at it. There's something reassuring about it. You're not afraid here. You're sure of what you see. This painting of the box hedges with the begonias is an extreme vision of Villandry. Villandry also has some very natural areas, but here it's extremely rigid, a geometric diagram that is so precise that I wanted to show it seen from above, like a drawing from above. I also like the heart. I like gardens of love with all the symbolism. And there is that contrast of extraordinary colours with these fluorescent reds and dark yet rich greens. I think I've come up with a way to do the begonias using a white that I hardly ever use. A white they call transparent white.
Four gardens represent four love themes. There's tender love with the beautifully shaped hearts, still flowering in pink. There's passionate love with the deformed hearts that seem like they're turning around in a waltz. There is adulterous love, with these symbols representing fans and butterfly wings to underscore the infidelity. And lastly, there's tragic love, which no longer has hearts, but dagger blades flowering red, the colour of blood. And there are 72 yew trees that have been pruned according to the strict Villandry style. A cube of yew and 3 crowns topped with a dome. These Villandry yews are important. We work with the plant to make a cultivated mosaic. We use topiary, our box hedges and flowers to offer a tableau to our visitors year-round.
Laurent talks about our visitors like everyone who works here. He has appropriated the success. Each employee is responsible for one area that they are given to manage. They can go ahead and get involved, giving free rein to their creativity. This is the case for Emmanuelle, who, with her catering team, has created a natural style of food that is served in the barns of the chateau. Her recipes are inspired from age-old knowledge.
Every day I come to pick some herbs for the restaurant. But I don't take huge quantities. I've managed the catering at the Chateau for 14 years now. I try to work with the head gardener according to the seasons. That way, I can introduce our visitors to the use of mugwort or rhubarb, which they have seen growing when they toured the gardens. We use all of that. This is comfrey, and I use it in soups. It binds very well. I'm really lucky to be able to use a little of the plants from the simple garden where we are now. Of course, it wasn't really planted for my restaurant kitchen. Everything in this garden is from the Middle Ages, when people used a lot of herbs for medicinal purposes. The yarrow is flowering now. We use the flowers in food and the leaves for infusions or in salads. I use the gardens for the restaurant, so there is a connection and sense of discovery for visitors. All our customers, regular or otherwise, like the freshness of it, and they have discovered quite a few flavours that they've never tasted elsewhere. You need to keep it simple in the kitchen, simple and tasty. I just want to make people happy.
sun garden makes people happy. All this beauty on offer here makes people happy. The water mirror, which speaks the silent language of the swans, also makes our photographer happy. Not a blade of grass must be out of place on the slope where thousands of spectators will sit to watch the show of the year, the Night of 1,000 Fires.
It's very important to avoid any contact between the two, otherwise it will short circuit and the row won't ignite. I'm connecting these all together. That will link up all the fireworks that will go off together in a row with a little electric cable, so that when a current is sent through it tonight, it will catch fire.
Tonight is going to be explosive. The preparations for this nighttime event are done by pyrotechnicians who know how to ignite these fountains and bouquets of light. If nothing goes wrong with this tangle of electric cables, then the display will take the crowd's breath away. Meanwhile, others distribute the candles that will burn for 8 hours, according to a precisely symmetrical plan.
Tonight we're organising the Night of 1,000 Fires in the grounds of the Chateau. We'll be lighting up between 1,800 and 2,000 candles. There will be activities in the gardens, including a spectacular firework display by the water over there. There will also be a son et lumière show. There will be old-fashioned wooden games, and the whole evening will be a feast for the eyes. When the night falls and you see the gardens lit up by all these candles, it's like a fairy tale, and the chateau looks fabulous. You've only got 45 minutes left to finish lighting the candles, so you'd better get a move on. Thank you. The kids don't want to miss the 1,000 Fires. It's sacred to them.
Okay, let's go take care of the candles.
It's a great experience. It's really fun.
Let's go open the gate. Let's get on with the show.
That's a good idea to get here early.
The weather is lovely and the candles are working well. Everyone is in great mood, the gardens look beautiful, I'm very satisfied. The only thing is that I'm always worried there'll be too many visitors, but I think it should be okay.
Ah, t'as le bras un petit peu. C'est les 5 du Tour de France. Ça passe des contrats.
In the Court of Honour, open to all ages, the evening's visitors can play without stakes, have fun without risk, and dream without limits.
Bravo!